What if there was like a really simple way to get rid of all the trash on Earth?
Yeah.
Just completely make it vanish.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine if we could just like throw it all into a volcano.
Yeah.
All of it
Okay.
just gone in a puff of smoke. It kind of sounds like something out of a movie, right?
Yeah, it does.
But the question is, would that actually work?
Well, that's what we're going to look into today.
Welcome to the deep dive.
I'm the expert for this deep dive.
I'm the host, and today we're asking the big question.
Mm-hmm.
Would chucking all our garbage into a volcano be a brilliant solution or a massive environmental disaster?
It's a great question.
I mean, it's a tempting thought, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Just make all that trash disappear in a fiery inferno.
Right.
But let's get real for a sec.
Okay.
What would actually happen if we tried to use volcanoes as giant trash incinerators?
Yeah, that's something we really need to think about.
So let's paint a picture here.
Okay.
Imagine standing on the edge of Kilauea Volcano in Hawaii.
I've been there.
You got that sulfur smell in the air.
Oh, yeah.
You can feel the heat radiating off that glowing lava.
It's incredible.
And now imagine this.
Okay.
Trucks rolling up, one after another, loaded with trash.
Oh, wow.
Everything we throw away.
Okay.
Plastic containers, food scraps, old electronics.
Yeah.
Then they dump it all into the lava.
And
Seems like it just vanishes, right?
right.
Well, our goal today is to go beyond that surface level.
Absolutely.
We're going to look at the science and figure out what really happens to all that junk when it hits that intense heat.
Okay, good.
And even more importantly, we want to know if this volcano disposal idea is even remotely practical or safe.
Right. Safety first.
So let's start with the most common trash.
Huh.
Plastic.
Okay.
Lava is like super hot, right?
Oh, yeah. Incredibly hot.
We're talking 700 to 1200 degrees Celsius.
Wow, that's hot.
You'd think it would just melt the plastic into nothing,
Yeah, you would think so.
but it turns out it's not that simple.
So what happens?
Well, when certain types of plastic, especially those with chlorine like PVC, burn trick, they don't just vaporize.
Huh.
They release this nasty gas called hydrogen chloride.
Oh, no.
And when that gas mixes with moisture in the air, it forms hydrochloric acid.
Acid rain.
Yeah, basically.
That's not good.
And it gets worse.
Oh.
Burning plastic can also create dioxins.
Dioxins.
They're super harmful chemicals that can cause cancer and mess up your immune system.
And they don't break down easily, right?
Right. These things stick around in the environment for a long time.
That's a problem.
They can contaminate the soil and water.
And the food chain?
Yeah, exactly. So even if the plastic looks like it's gone, it's actually leaving behind all these toxic residues.
So it's not a clean solution at all.
Nope, not even close.
What about metals?
Okay, so metals are even more complicated.
How so?
Well, a lot of the heavy metals we find in trash, like lead, mercury, and cadmium, they don't have super high melting points.
So what happens to them in lava?
Instead of melting, they vaporize.
Meaning that,
They turn into gas.
oh, wow.
Toxic gas that gets released into the air.
So we're talking air pollution.
Big time.
And these metal particles can travel.
Oh, yeah. They can spread far and wide and end up contaminating the soil and water far from the volcano.
So even if we threw all our metal trash into a volcano, it wouldn't really solve the problem. It would just spread it around.
Exactly. It's not a solution. It's just shifting the problem somewhere else.
Makes sense.
Now, what about organic waste, like food scraps and yard trimmings?
That's a good question.
You might think that stuff would just burn up cleanly in the lava.
Yeah, it seems like it would.
But here's the thing.
What?
Volcanoes aren't exactly giant oxygen-rich furnaces.
So?
If you dump a ton of organic waste into a volcano, it might not burn completely.
And what happens then?
It produces methane,
Methane.
which is a super potent greenhouse gas, way worse than carbon dioxide.
So instead of helping the environment, we'd be making climate change worse.
Exactly.
Not good.
And then there's the wild card electronics.
Oh, yeah. What about those?
Imagine a smartphone packed with a lithium-ion battery hitting that molten lava.
What happens?
Boom!
Seriously.
Those batteries can explode.
Wow.
It's like a mini volcanic eruption.
That's scary.
And on top of that, electronics are full of heavy metals and other toxic stuff.
Great circuit boards and all that.
When that stuff gets heated up, it releases all these dangerous chemicals into the air.
So we're talking about a whole cocktail of toxins.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
So even if we ignore the risk of explosions, electronics are still a huge problem when it comes to volcano disposal.
Okay, so we've seen what happens to different types of trash when they meet lava.
And it's not good.
But let's step back for a second and ask a more fundamental question.
Okay.
Can lava actually destroy anything completely?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's super hot, right?
It is?
But Is it hot enough to obliterate everything?
Well, it turns out even lava has its limits. Yeah, some materials like steel and nickel have melting points that are actually higher than the temperature of lava.
So they wouldn't melt.
They might partially melt or just sit there kind of like stubborn chunks in a really hot oven.
Okay, and what about the stuff that does melt?
It doesn't just disappear.
It doesn't.
No, it transforms.
Drink away.
It can turn into ash or slag or gas.
So it's not really gone.
Right, it just changes form, and often those new forms can be even more problematic.
So it's like a barbecue gone wrong.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
You end up with this messy, smoky residue, not a clean slate.
Exactly. And research has shown that to completely break down waste, you need incredibly high controlled temperatures and specific oxygen levels.
And volcanoes don't really provide that, do they?
No, they're much more chaotic and unpredictable environments.
Speaking of messy residue, let's talk about toxic gases.
Okay,
Volcanoes already release gases naturally, right?
that's right. Things like sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide.
But if we start dumping tons of trash in there, it's going to make the air quality way worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We'd be adding all sorts of nasty stuff to the mix.
Right.
Carbon monoxide, which is poisonous nitrogen oxides, which contribute to smog and acid rain, and those dioxins and furans we talked about earlier.
Right, the ones that can stick around in the environment for a long time.
Exactly. Plus, we'd be releasing all sorts of volatile organic compounds, many of which are linked to health problems.
So it's not just about the immediate area around the volcano.
Right. These pollutants can travel and affect plants, animals, and water sources far away.
And I remember reading a paper in Frontiers in Earth Science that talked about how unpredictable these chemical reactions could be.
What do you mean?
Well, when you mix all these different chemicals from burning trash with the gases already present in a volcano,
Yeah.
you can get some really unexpected reactions.
So new and potentially dangerous compounds could form.
Exactly. It's like a giant chemistry experiment gone wrong.
And we have no idea what the consequences might be.
Right? It adds a whole new level of risk and uncertainty to this whole volcano disposal idea.
So we've seen how dangerous it would be to dump trash into volcanoes from a chemical perspective.
Right.
But what about the volcanoes themselves?
Oh, yeah, that's another big concern.
I mean, they're not just giant holes in the ground.
No, they're active geological systems.
And they might not react well to being used as trash dumps.
Exactly. They can be very sensitive to changes in their environment.
Like how?
Well, there was this experiment in Ethiopia in 2002 where they threw a small bag of trash into a lava lake.
What happened?
It caused these explosive bursts of lava.
Whoa,
Now imagine what would happen if we started dumping tons of trash in there.
that's a scary thought.
Yeah, it could be really dangerous.
In what ways?
Well, all that trash could block volcanic vents, trapping gases and increasing pressure inside the volcano.
Like plugging up a pressure cooker.
Exactly. Eventually, that pressure has to go somewhere, and it could lead to a much bigger and more dangerous eruption.
So it wouldn't just be the toxic gases we'd have to worry about.
Right, we could be triggering major volcanic events.
And on top of that, the sheer weight of all that trash could destabilize the volcano itself.
Leading to...
More eruptions and unpredictable volcanic activity.
So basically, dumping trash into volcanoes is a recipe for disaster.
It sounds like it.
It would create a toxic mess, destabilize the volcanoes themselves, and potentially trigger massive eruptions.
Not to mention all the ethical and logistical challenges.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Even if we could somehow magically make the science work,
Right.
the reality is that trying to dispose of all our trash in volcanoes on a global scale is just not practical.
Why not?
Well, for starters, most volcanoes are located in really remote areas.
True.
Think about it.
Okay.
You got volcanoes on isolated islands or high up in mountain ranges.
Yeah.
Transporting all our trash to those places would be a logistical nightmare.
It would require a huge amount of fuel and resources just to move the trash.
And that would create even more pollution.
Exactly. It would defeat the whole purpose.
Plus, think about the sheer volume of trash we're talking about.
It's mind-boggling.
The U.S. alone produces over 250 million tons of trash every year.
Wow. And globally, it's over 2 billion tons.
Even if we divided that evenly among all the active volcanoes in the world, each one would still be getting over 1 million tons of trash per year.
That's a lot of trash.
And only a handful of volcanoes have large enough lava lakes to even handle that much material.
Right. It's like trying to empty a bathtub with a teaspoon.
And let's not forget the cost.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Building the infrastructure to transport and dump all that trash into volcanoes would be incredibly expensive.
We're talking billions, if not trillions of dollars.
And it would be way more expensive than our current waste management methods like recycling and landfills.
So it's not just impractical, it's also financially unsustainable.
And then there's the potential for global disasters.
That's a scary thought.
Imagine multiple volcanoes erupting at the same time, releasing massive amounts of toxic gases into the atmosphere.
It would be devastating.
And it could trigger widespread environmental damage and even political conflicts over who gets to use which volcanoes as trash dumps.
So it's a recipe for global chaos.
Basically.
So it's clear that volcano disposal is not the answer.
Not at all.
But the fact that we even considered it tells us something important.
What's that?
It shows how desperate we are to find a solution to our trash problem.
We're so overwhelmed by the sheer amount of trash we produce that we're willing to consider even the craziest ideas.
Right, and it highlights the need to find more sustainable and effective solutions.
So what are the alternatives?
We already have some good options.
Shelly Krill.
Recycling is a big one.
It saves energy and reduces the need for new resources.
Exactly. For example, recycling aluminum cans uses about 95% less energy than making new ones from raw materials.
That's a huge difference,
And then there's composting.
which turns organic waste into fertilizer.
Right. It keeps that waste out of landfills and helps enrich our soil,
And we can also use waste to energy plants.
where they burn trash in a controlled way to generate electricity.
And those plants have filters to capture most of the harmful emissions, right?
Right. So it's much cleaner than just chucking everything into a volcano.
And of course, we can always try to reduce the amount of trash we produce in the first place,
Absolutely. That's the most effective solution.
like using reusable bags and water bottles instead of disposable ones.
Right. And there are some great examples of countries that have successfully implemented policies to reduce waste.
Like Rwanda.
Exactly. They banned plastic bags and have seen a significant reduction in overall trash.
So it can be done.
It definitely can.
We just need to be more proactive and committed to finding solutions.
I agree.
So to sum it all up, using volcanoes as trash dumps is a terrible idea.
It's dangerous and practical and would likely create far more problems than it solves.
It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
But exploring these what-if scenarios, even the crazy ones, can be helpful.
How so?
It forces us to think outside the box and to confront the reality of our trash problem.
And it reminds us that we need to find real solutions, not just quick fixes.
So the next time you're about to throw something away, think about where it's going to end up.
And instead of picturing it disappearing in a volcano, imagine it being recycled or composted.
Or even better, imagine it never being created in the first place.
We have the power to make a difference.
We just need to use it wisely.
And remember that small changes can add up to big results.
That's a great point to end on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
And remember, reduce, reuse, recycle.
And don't throw your trash in a volcano.